Howdy y'all, and welcome back to Country Fried Shorts. Over the last few days, we've been down this path putting together a photogrammetrized import for Tabletop Stimulator, and today is no different. With our textured mesh generated, we're going to go ahead and export the thing, double checking that there's only the one texture file so that it works correctly. Once we get to that importing step, it'll need to be just that one texture, so we want to double check that our exported texture file is just a single texture file and not the multi-texture file build option as Zephyr allows. Since we're going for that solo texture, once we export the file, it'll save as a single texture file with a similar file name to the chosen exported file name as we enter in the 3ds Zephyr software. It's not super important to add a super strong file structure name here beyond just knowing what you're playing with for the Blender, with which we'll go ahead and open up Blender and drag that OBJ file into the Blender scene so we can start sizing things properly. I've got a scene file built up for editing here to ensure that things are always uniformly scaled and prepped for consistent import into my workshop item, which we'll cover in a future episode. If you too want to work on importing your own files into our Country Fried Mercs workshop file, don't hesitate to join up on the CFM Discord and chat me up to get tips, tricks, and access to the Blender scene to match the scaling with your own efforts. Anyhow, once we've got our model exported and then imported into Blender, we're going to get it sized correctly using the mesh item hex base sized for TTS and get the model kind of sunk down into that base so that the terrain around the feet of our mech is positioned correctly on top of that pre-sized base in the Blender scene. Once we get it lined up just right, we can then apply a Boolean modifier to the mech's mesh using the difference operand, aimed at another mesh inside our file called cube for cutting bases off, which is a fat cube aligned with the top of the sized base. This will carve off the rough bottom of the mesh as exists in the raw export from Zephyr. Finally, we'll turn on the mech collider mesh so we can see it and adjust the vertical size to coincide with the mech's head, and then go on in to export both the mesh and then the collider as well, each in turn this time with a clearly defined file name structure name for ease of identification. At this point, there's several hundred mechs already imported into the Country Fried Mercs module, so for me, it's well worth taking a little time and naming our secondarily exported files in a clearly identifiable schema. I highly recommend you do the same and take that extra moment of time to avoid any headache way down the road. Finally, I can't overstate how important it is to remember